Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is running for the Board of Education, and we had a really great conversation about one of her responses to the candidate forum, and it was exactly what it should be. It was messy, it was complex, it was in-depth, which is exactly what we need. There are no simple answers here. But without further ado, I'll let you listen. The woman, the myth, the legend, Laura Bratt. Thank you for coming, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am marginally surviving. There's the first round of the SATs getting delivered again.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's not the first, but the big round of SATs coming next week and then the week after. So you have students just scrambling. A lot of people who had written it off and just decided, hey, we're not going to do this. Now they're swarming back in and trying to get meaningful review in a very short period of time. And I mean, it's crazy.
Do you recommend that juniors do the SAT, or do you recommend that summer before senior year?
So it really depends on the student. That's a really good question. In general, I say try to knock it out your junior year, okay? And try to knock it out mid-junior year.
With the assumption of taking it again, or?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Here's the thing. One and done, that's beautiful. But it's almost like a unicorn, not in lacking performance, okay? What happens is when students hit their mark on the first try, which we of course shoot to do, they're more likely to want to take it again. They almost never hit their mark on the first try and say, I'm out. They say, hey, you know what? I think I could do a little bit. So it's always the kind of thing where I try to help them see that they are going to have a desire to do it again. So if somebody calls and they say, hey, look, I got a kid who's really on top of things and she wants to take this test, what do you recommend? I say, all right, well, look, think about the December, March, or December, February kind of 1-2 punch. If somebody is saying, hey, my kid's really not super academic, I would say, okay, well, consider maybe a little bit later, maybe do a March, May SAT 1-2. And then if you have somebody who says, hey, look, my kid's really struggling, I want to line him up to have success with these tests, but there's a lot going on. He probably has a lot of tutors right now in his junior year and a lot of other things. Is there a way we can work this out? Let him get through junior year and work this out over the summer leading into senior. Yeah, then we have that. But in the absence of any of those really kind of extenuating circumstances, I usually say, hey, junior year if possible. Obviously, our whole life is an extenuating circumstance at this point, so it's tough. So, yeah, I did want to throw out, just so everybody knows, I did offer a second interview to the Zone 2 candidates. I am a man with 3 kids and a wife, and these students that are trying to review. So I didn't want to be exclusionary to Zone 3. And I didn't want to offer it to select people and not others. But again, you've kind of stumbled on a tricky situation with communication, which is what this all is about. Look, let's try to communicate more effectively. And it sounds like you had a real stumbling block on social media, as is always the case, because social media is probably the worst possible way to communicate. And you reached out and asked if you could talk about this a little more. And I personally think this is a hugely important topic, so I'm totally in favor of doing it. Thank you for calling. I would love to hear what you have to say about the SROs and schools in general.
Yeah. Thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity. I think that, I know that this is a very important conversation, and I know that because of the reaction. We had a forum, I think it's been 2 very long weeks, maybe 1 week. I don't even know. You lose track of time with everything.
It seems like a lifetime.
It does. And the last question was about SROs, which wasn't something that I really anticipated or expected. But I have thoughts on it, and I made my thoughts known. And essentially, what I said was that not all students feel safe around police, and that police are not social workers, and that we need more counselors. And I said I'm a relatively passionate person. I mean, I also consider myself to be calm, but
yes.
This was my first forum, and it was the end of 2 very long hours where I was having to think on my feet and also listen to the other candidates and not react too much to what I was hearing, and that that answer for me was partly in reaction to some of the statements that I heard prior to that, which was, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. That's part of a forum and a debate. And
if I may ask real fast, how long did you have to respond?
90 seconds,
Okay.
a minute and a half.
So let me just be very clear. If you could sum up the entirety of your thoughts of school safety, officer-student relationships, the entire summation of your life thought in 90 seconds, you would quite possibly be the most brilliant woman I've ever met in my entire, what a complex question to throw.
It is a complex
in 90
question.
seconds.
It is, and I think I know in some ways it's more complex in San Ramon than it would be in another more urban district, because there's a lot to it, a lot more to it than just the simple, this big chunk of students are disenfranchised, and there's, this surveillance idea and all of this stuff that's happening in San Ramon. There's a place for SROs, and they do add value to our school sites and our school district. And as a parent, I can say that they make me feel confident in the safety of my kids at that school site. And I think that I felt like I got the wind knocked out of me. I was blown back on my heels because I did not think that what I said was that divisive and that polarizing. I realize now that it was, and so now let's move forward and let's talk about it. I found that a narrative was created around what I said in a way that I felt was misrepresented as to what I said and how I feel. And so I've had to further explain. And then, of course, I find, as with social media, that there are people that any answer that I'm going to give that's authentic to me isn't the answer that they want to hear. And so, that also creates that kind of frustration all around that I'm very quickly learning as a junior or a freshman politician, I guess, right. That you can't make everyone happy, and your skin really needs to be thick, and you can't take things too personally, and you have to stand for what you stand for and believe in what you believe in. And I believe that every student needs to feel safe, and I believe that every student's voice needs to be represented. And that was the lens that I was looking at in that answer, and looking through in that answer. And so from my perspective, like I was saying, as a parent, and from many of these wonderful, very involved and very passionate parents that I'm grateful that we have in the school district, because that's part of what makes the school district great, is caring, engaged parents, right?
Yes.
And their perspective, just like mine, and I shouldn't say that. I don't know. The only part of their perspective that I know is what I see on social media. So I can't say that I really know their perspective. But what I see from my perspective is that idea that that SROs are making me feel comfortable sending my kids to school. Because, I just like you and all of us parents, we watch the news one night and we see the horror of a school shooting, and then we have to get up the next morning and pack our kids' lunch and send them to school, right? And that is, I can't put it into words. It's heartbreaking. It's scary on so many levels. And so to know that there is a armed officer on campus that has, that has a weapon at the ready, so that if someone, God forbid, I don't even want to think about it, right? It's unspeakable, right? But so that makes me feel really good. So of course I can understand why every parent is going to be passionate about that, and I get that, and I acknowledge that, and I respect that, and I value that. But I think that I think that not all kids from their perspective, feel safe around an armed and sworn police officer on campus. And that may only be 2% of our students. You know, we don't have a large black and brown population, but that's even more reason to make sure that we acknowledge that and that we talk about it and that we make sure that every student feels like they are heard and valued and that their perspective is a part of the equation. And so that, you know, that was kind of where I was coming from. And then, of course, we need more counselors. We need more social workers. I mean, that's, you know, and again, one of the mistakes that I made, or I don't want to call it a mistake, but anyway, was the fact that I was reacting to a statement previous to me that stated, from what I heard, stated, police officers help counsel students. And I wanted to make it clear that that's not the answer for that's not the answer for counseling. That's, you know, that doesn't mean that we replace all SROs with counselors. That doesn't mean that at all. That doesn't mean that we, you know, that what that means is that we need to focus on making sure that we are funding and giving the resources for social, emotional, and mental health for our students. But the mistake was that I packaged it together in that 90 seconds, right? And so then it's like, well, she's saying that she's going to replace, and now I'm defunding the police, and now I'm, you know, and now
all in 90 seconds, I'm defunding the police.
Exactly. Well, and that's and you know, and one of the reasons why I called you is because I listened to Trustee Marvel's podcast, and he right away, and I mean, maybe I'm assuming, maybe he wasn't talking about me. There's 3 women in this race. I listened to all of the responses of the 3 women, and mine certainly was the most polarizing, and mine is the one that people are talking about on social media about being, all of a sudden, I'm defunding the police. So I'm going to assume, because he used the pronoun she, that he was in fact talking about me. And I'm endorsed by Serbia. Yay. I'm really excited and proud of that, and we can talk about that later. But and so when he made the comment that and this is where my skin needs to get thicker, and we all have strong opinions, and we're all passionate, and that's awesome. But I felt like it's one thing for a group of parents in a Facebook group that's a private group to say that I said that I wanted to defund the police, and another thing for the president of the school board to say in a broadcasted podcast that I said that I wanted to defund the police, and that, or not, I don't know that I honestly, I didn't look, couldn't listen to it again. No, I'm sorry. But he said that I wanted to remove SROs from campus, to the point where now it's going to be on the agenda at the next board meeting. And that's not what I said, and that wasn't the intent that I had. And so I just felt like I needed to make that clear. So
I get it. And
yeah.
Again, I think, so there are a lot of things here, right? So first off, I don't think that you have to be an African American or Hispanic American or of darker skin at all to not feel comfortable around police officers. When I was younger, I was going to a really rough middle school, and I had some of my friends from my class were into some less savory things. I wasn't personally, but they were my friends from school, at the very least, and some of them had run-ins with police officers, and they related to them. They related the experiences to me through the 12 and 13-year-old lens. Right now, a lot of these experiences had to do with, you know, like fights they were getting into, and then in the neighborhoods, and so police would come and pull them apart and things.
Right.
And because of that, I remember having police officers come and do presentations in class and being exceedingly distrustful. Now, again, I'm Mexican. I don't look Mexican, but I am. And I know other people in my classes who were friends with the students I was talking about. And, you know, there was not a great warm and fuzzy feeling around the officers. But, again, it's not the distrust of police and law enforcement is not solely in the square of let's say, minorities, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
that's, regardless if we had 0% population African American or 100% population African American, you're going to have people that don't necessarily feel comfortable around the police. Now, here's something that's interesting, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I think there are broad misconceptions around what the function of SROs actually are.
Right.
Right. so my brother-in-law happens to be a police officer in the Oakland, Berkeley area, and he was an SRO at one of the major high schools for a long time. And first off, he has a master's in social welfare before he even went into the service. And at their graduation, the guy who was promoting them to be police officers made an enormous point of saying, we're peace officers. We're not police officers. He says, we are peace officers. We are here to keep the peace, to help peace, facilitate peace. And that really marked me. I think that was like 2007. I remember that very distinctly. I was like, God, what an astute point. And he has taken that mission. He has embodied that kind of mentality. But I was speaking with him recently saying, look, there are these big issues. And he said, it's almost impossible to convey the impact of having an SRO on campus, right? One of the biggest aspects is the students that are uncomfortable with police come to become more familiar and comfortable with...
You destigmatize police by having a police officer on campus who becomes a friend. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. And even he said, look, even though I may have only known, like 2 or 3% of the population of the high school by name, which is a huge number of students, by the way,
yeah.
He said other people would come up to me and tell me about issues that were popping up because, and we're not even talking about drug issues, right? The vast majority of the time he said, look, we did not interject ourselves into the protocol of the school. We were there at their request, and the vast majority of times you had younger people that were victims of either other students or of adults that didn't have anyone else to go out to, and they didn't want to tell the people at the school because the SROs at the school he was working at only prosecuted and delved down that formal road if it was requested of them, right? And if the student had gone up to one of the school officials, the school official was required to report these things, right? So there was this whole buffer and counseling mechanism in place for him that he kind of represented at that school, and it had an enormous impact. So I know people very frequently think of the worst, right? We need an SRO on campus to stop the absolute worst case scenario, right? And I believe in that too, right? Like I'm all for that. Let's make our schools the absolute safest places and the least likely to be hit by some crazy person.
Right, absolutely.
But I think when you go beyond that worst case scenario, there's all of this gray area and intensity that students have to deal with somehow that can be improved. Their life experience can be improved by having SROs on campus. I know they may not have the title of counselor, but I can assure you from my own experience working with students, like I'm an SAT tutor, right? But the number of times people have come to me because we develop a rapport and they're like, hey, look, I got this other thing. That's a really impactful thing for people, and it's an important piece beyond the safety aspect.
Right. No, and I agree. I had taken some time. One of the things that I do is if I don't know, I find out, and when I started to realize that the perspective that I had wasn't the full perspective and I needed to learn more, I've spent the last few days and I've spoken with a few different people that have experience with SROs because we didn't have SROs on campus when I was growing up in farmland, right? And dairyland. And so I spoke with Lieutenant Tammy Williams, who is the San Ramon, she's a San Ramon police officer. She's assigned to Cal starting in January. She's a former SRO at other school districts, and she's in charge. She's the manager, the SRO manager. I don't know exactly what her title is, but that's one of her responsibilities is to manage the SROs in San Ramon that are at, I suppose, Cal and Doherty. And I learned a lot about her perspective, and she's an amazing woman, and she's she just like every SRO is well intentioned. I mean, I don't question that at all. And she talked to me about her roles and responsibilities, and we talked a lot about that idea of her being there and being the person that she is and being a real person, a real human, right? on campus, but also in a uniform and armed, creates that buildup of trust that our culture has, and the media and the things that we see on the news has broken down, right? Like that you come kids, and like what I mean, partly what you said too, but and my perspective of a police officer at times, and I is what I see on TV, and that's maybe 0.5% of maybe 0.1% of all police officers, but that's what you see, and so then that infiltrates, and so then that becomes how you see police, which isn't true. And as an adult, I know that, and I question that, and I have to work harder to question that. So anyway, so I had this conversation with her, and she talked about how they, one of their roles is to make sure that the teachers are educated on how to handle situations, right? They make sure that, when there's a question that pops up in, I don't know, a class, a social studies class, that they'll be called in to talk about, their perspective of whatever the question is or whatever. So they're not just, and they're not there to surveil. And then when they are asked to, interject into a situation, it's an admin that it's never on their own. It's never that they see something and they
they
and they
draw
do
their
something.
Firearm
exactly
and get crazy,
exactly.
Like, that's not
and
happening.
Right, and I understand that as an adult, and I know more about that now because I talked with Lieutenant Williams, which again, I can't say enough about how grateful I am for her taking that time.
I'd love to talk to her.
Yeah,
maybe I can reach out to her.
Yeah, and the she was talking about all these great things, and the point that I was trying to make in my 90 seconds and talk to her a little bit about was this idea that it's nothing that an SRO is doing wrong at all. And in fact, everything that I've seen in San Ramon and speaking with her and talking to, I spoke with an assistant principal, I spoke with a wellness counselor at Cal, that it's nothing that they're doing. But the question that I have that I think we need to talk, or that we need to make sure we're aware of, is the fact that there are students that are going to have a perspective regardless, and it helps that SRO is someone like your brother-in-law and like Lieutenant Williams to kind of break that down. But they're going to come into that school site as a freshman, and they're going to have, just based on what they've seen on the news and how experience maybe that they've had, or maybe that their parents have told them about, or that their siblings or their cousins or whatever, they're going to have a bias towards that SRO. And so that's going to make them feel unsafe. And it's not anything that the SRO has done to create that. It's something that student is coming into, and we need to respect that, and we need to make sure that we build a structure so that we can help them question that bias by having engagement with Lieutenant Williams. But also we need to make sure that everyone involved has an understanding that they're just a kid, and this is what they know, and that's not wrong. It just needs to evolve, and they need to learn. They need to learn more, right?
It's their lived experience.
It's their lived experience.
However,
yeah.
You can
it may
have
not be actual experience, but it's what they know.
Well, right. So we could spin that. However, is it something that they've experienced? Is it something? I mean, watching something on the news, right? Like if I sat back and watched an hour's worth of news clips on all of the most recent plane crashes,
you'd never fly.
I would look at an airplane and be like, oh my God, it's a death pod.
Right.
Like, what is that?
Right.
How could anybody get in there? But obviously we don't do that, but in some way, we celebrate in this very morbid, insane way the worst aspects of our justice system, and obviously things need to be brought to light. We need to make progress. Anybody who says we don't have progress to make is silly.
Right.
How do we? I think what you've made clear is that, look, as a parent sending my kid to school, I'm thankful that there are SROs there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that there's a sworn officer keeping my kid safer. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you are attempting to say as well as and, not but, because these aren't mutually exclusive.
No, yeah.
But if we neglect the voice of a minority, right, if we try to sweep under the rug these feelings, then that creates a huge slew of problems. Specifically, if we don't acknowledge there's a distrust or an anxiety, we can't figure out a course of action to address that. So how do we do that? I mean, how do we change the perspective from an educational standpoint, starting at this time? Because there's nothing that we need more. You know, I have students that, I mean, I love my students. They're great. And sometimes I see things on some of them follow my podcast on Instagram, the Instagram page, and I see some of the things they post, and it's like, oh my gosh. And of course, I don't bring it up with them. I don't want to tell them they're wrong, but when I see, some of my students just celebrating the defunding of, and I brought it up, the Berkeley police, it's like, oh my gosh, this is not the progress you think it is. And defunding the Berkeley police does not necessarily make the African American lives in Berkeley safer. Right? Like, how about we start with the fact that there are African American minors that are subject to abuses and horrible actions by adults, right? Well, what about them? Are they safer because there are fewer police officers, or police officers aren't going to be responding to domestic violence calls? Right. Like if there's some poor little kid who's getting the hell beat out of him, is he better off if a counselor shows up? Right? And these are problems that, again, this is my personal spot.
Right.
It's not really fair.
No, and it's that, I mean, I'm not going to question the term defund the police because I don't own that. So it's not,
what I'm saying is, from an educational standpoint, we have these young people chanting this mantra that is, in my mind, flawed and fine. None of us are perfect. But how do it stems from an anxiety that I think you were trying to tap into, which is not everyone feels comfortable. And I, as a parent, feel more comfortable, but as a representative, as a trustee, we at least need to bring out into the light this potentially minority view, but a view or a feeling. Yeah. So how do we change that? How do we shift the dialogue?
I mean, I think that I firmly believe that, acknowledgement is the first really important step. And, I know, I mean, I think about myself, and when I'm, when I have a bias, I do my best, and I fail at times, which I did in this 90-second answer, but I do my best to question it, right? Like I question, what thought is running through my head when I see someone coming towards me walking down the street, that kind of thing, right? And so acknowledging that everyone has bias. I used to say, when I was a kid, well, I'm prejudiced, we're all prejudiced, because it's the human condition. It's like everything's relative, and everything that you learned, every minute of your life gives you a library of information that then when you come up to another event, you can shuffle through that library and be like, oh, wait, I know what a rose smells like. I'm going to, smell that rose, or whatever it is, right? And that's prejudgment to me. And so acknowledging that, acknowledging that there are students that don't feel safe, and not, hearing that statement and feeling like, and going and reacting to it in a way that an extreme way, but saying, yeah, you're right. There are students that don't feel safe. There are also students that do feel safe. I didn't say every student didn't feel safe. I said some students don't feel safe, right? And so not having an open enough mind to know that it's okay to not get it right, to not do it right, and to do your best, but that isn't necessarily what is the best for everyone, kind of a thing. So acknowledge it, acknowledge that it exists, and then educate yourself, right? Educate everyone. Let's talk about how we can, educate that student that feels unsafe around police, right? Like you talked about, like, give them the opportunities to be able to become comfortable around the SRO. Give them, lifelines and ways to be able to feel like that, like the power dynamic that exists in their head, see that that's not necessarily the power dynamic that exists. And make an effort to make sure that there is an equal power dynamic as can be with a child and an adult, right? And make sure that everyone involved, that the administrator, that they're, really paying attention to when they call in that SRO and keep a record, write it down, write down who it is that you're calling that SRO in for when they have a vape pen, and who you're not calling the SRO in for when they have a vape pen, right? Like what, and then see where your biases is, and then learn from it, learn from that data and that information. And so break it down that way. And then obviously action. Like we need to be brave about how we approach it, and not feel, because there's stigma in admitting that you have racist thoughts. I have racist thoughts, and I have a black brother. Well, I can't be racist. No, I readily admit that I'm racist. And that doesn't mean that I'm, woke or whatever, and you can, belittle me in that mind. That's not what I mean. I mean that I have prejudgment about every single thing that I see and hear as I walk through my life, and based on the world that I grew up in and the culture that I see, it has seeped into my instinct and my ability to judge, right, where I come from when I judge. And so being brave about talking about that, and being brave about saying, why is it that you look through the history book and 9 out of 10 people that are listed are Caucasian men. There are great women heroes. There are great Hispanic heroes and African American heroes, and but yet they're not in the history books. There's some, and it's getting better. But just be brave about that and talk about that and change it. Create action around it. So I can, I couldn't tell you right now we have to do exactly this, and this. But I think that we need to have an intent and a mindset to be able to really push the envelope, and that means pushing people's buttons, and that means making people feel really uncomfortable, and that's hard, and I'm not going to win any votes by making people feel uncomfortable, and that's really not why I'm doing this. I mean, honestly, it's like I'm doing this so that everyone feels represented and heard, and it's giving me an opportunity to have this conversation that I don't know if I hadn't made that statement with that question, and it hadn't made people feel uncomfortable, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well,
we need to have this
unlikely.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And we need to have this conversation, even in San Ramon.
Yeah, so. It's, again, I think it's an incredibly complex thing, and I think the more comfort and familiarity people have on an officer side and a citizen side. Yep. People talk about wanting officers to be members of the community, and it's like, well, I don't have to physically live here necessarily to be a member of this community. If I'm an officer and I'm walking around the school halls every single day, seeing people at brunch and before school and after school and lunch, and the whole time, I become part of that community. And I think that is such a crucial piece in the whole equation. And I think it is important to have these conversations. But I think it's also such a minefield, because there are aspects of lived experience, both positive and negative, that people cling on to. And I think at the very least we all have to acknowledge, hey, we have distinctly different experiences in the world. Every single day we do. And if, Laura wants to come on and say, hey, look, this is my experience and these are my considerations and this is what I think we should talk about, and someone else wants to say, that's fine, this is it, I think at the very least we should stop invalidating right? And just
Right.
the problem is you say something, right? And it's not what people wanted to hear. And instead of saying, hey, what do you mean? Because this is it was kind of short. Can you elaborate?
Right.
Instead of doing that, people cling on to, this is who you are.
And this is what I heard.
This is what I heard.
Yeah.
This is what you are. And the biggest problem with that is it then instantly takes away the conversation from the validity of what you were saying, which is, hey, some students, some portion of students may not feel comfortable around officers, and they may not feel comfortable around guns, and they may not, all of those things are true. 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know how many students, and I'm not going to tell you why they feel that way, and I'm not going to tell you what color they are, because again, as a fair-skinned Hispanic dude, I felt uncomfortable around cops, and it wasn't because I had all these altercations with police officers. I just didn't feel comfortable around them. It's odd because I really liked watching Cops when I was a kid. I don't know. And they were usually going after those cracky white guys in like Alabama. Right. Anyway, the point is, it's complex. And I think your point is well taken, and I think it's wonderful that we can have these conversations. And who knows what the fallout will be. I'm already getting flack on the social medias for not saying this or saying too much. It's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just a person here with a microphone.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like what I was saying before, I mean, I really, it's been a hard week, but at the end of the day, right now, where I sit right now, I feel much more informed. I feel like I have been pushed out of my comfort zone in ways that I never expected. And I'm super grateful for all of that. And so at the end of the day, this is, and we're talking about this, and I've talked to, I've talked to more people and gotten more perspectives. And like I said before, that's my end goal, is to make sure that if I'm going to represent our district, that I'm listening, and that I'm gathering the information, and then I'm amplifying it. And that's what I'm doing right now in this conversation,
right. And more than anything, to be very frank with you, whether or not I agree with everything you said, which I think is impossible.
You don't have to.
Right.
I don't want you to.
Right. We don't really get better by always agreeing.
Right.
But just the fact that you can take a step back, clarify your thoughts, and then deliver them, that makes for a far better improvement in life. And I don't want to take things away from other people, especially people I haven't met, but I will say that the people on social media who on all sides, people for you, people against you, people talking to you or people talking to the other candidates, it's so clear talking with all of the candidates on and off the air that the type of dialogue that they have experienced, the type of, outlandish smear campaigns and the misrepresentations and the raw emotions and insanity that are going on in Facebook. I've never met those people on Facebook. I don't know who any of them are. But knowing the 6 candidates and talking to you, you're all wonderful people. You're passionate. You're committing yourselves. And to have you slandered like this in front of the community is... I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I suffice to say, I do not have strong enough words to strongly enough disagree with that type of communication, because again, I don't have to agree with you to say, you know what? You have a reasonable perspective, and I'm not going to take anything away from you just because I disagree, or say that you're absolutely perfect because I agree. And if we can't as a community stop talking like this and stop having these crazy smear campaigns and insane people that are keeping you up at night or harassing these other candidates or just all of these, you have all of that online, and it doesn't for a second help you clarify and come up with a better idea, because that's what we need. We need you to come up with a better idea. We need Greg, we need Shelley, we need Priscilla, we need all of you guys to come up with better ideas, and we need the better ideas to win the day. And when the better ideas win the day, our students benefit, our children benefit. And if we can't stop trying to minimize people and squash them down, we're not going to get the better ideas. We're going to pigeonhole people. We're going to demand that they take these 90-second sound bites and like encompass every possible thing. And it's
right. No, I feel like, I feel like I should reintroduce myself and say, my name's Laura Bratt and I'm a human being.
There you go. There you go.
Who just is trying to do the best I can, and is running for the school board because I feel like I can make a difference, and I want to represent everyone. And I think that every candidate is a human being, and every candidate deserves to be respected in a way that gives that understanding of everyone is trying to do the best that they can. I may not agree with every candidate, and that's what differentiates us, and that's where voters come in, and that's why there's an election, right? But at the same time, it's like, we're all in it for reasons that are meaningful for us in our heart, or we wouldn't do it, because this is not...
It's not a popularity contest.
Not a popularity
I'll tell you that much.
It's not at all, and it's not easy, and it's much harder than I thought. And I don't know where I'm getting the strength, but I have the I don't even know how to say it. I have that dream.
The fortitude and resolve.
I guess. I mean, I have. I don't.
I guess I have resolve. Come on.
I mean, it's more that I can see the potential. I can see, and not the potential in me sitting in the board and being the boss at all. That's not. I can see the potential in what I can do to lift people up and to shine a light on as many perspectives. I mean, there's so, our community is so wonderfully diverse and comes from so many different places and so many different thought ideas, and so, and it's like,
it's great.
It's awesome. And so engaged, engaged,
I hate to steal time from this, but have you ever spoken with Kumar?
I haven't. And
oh my gosh, he grew up in India. Yeah. Incredibly intelligent, interesting guy. I loved to talk to him. I was like, he brought up things I had never thought about. So to your point, such a diverse, amazing, different community.
And I shouldn't say this because I am a politician now.
Oh, watch out.
But I wish I could have a conversation with Kumar, and I don't feel like I can right now because of all of his signs and all of my signs and all of the what I mean?
I'll set you guys up after this.
But win or lose, regardless of where either one of us land, I have every intention of I think he has some great ideas, and I think that our ideas, could coalesce in ways that are pretty interesting.
Here's something for you. I've been thinking about this a lot, especially with that question, the SROs on campus. I feel like we're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah. Because
the question should have been, look, fact, everybody wants the safest possible schools. Fact, SROs on campus give us a smaller response time in the event of the worst. Okay? Now, fact, SROs on campus in their current representation, right, are not perfect. So what are issues that each of the candidates think we can improve upon with an SRO? 90 seconds.
Yeah.
That would have been a question where everybody rallies behind. You elevate yourself. The best idea wins the day. We have to acknowledge that not everybody likes them. We have to acknowledge we have a segment of our population of every color that feels uncomfortable. How can we facilitate better relations on both sides, right? Bring out the best in people instead of spending the time we have making people pick hard sides and then bastardizing their answers.
Right.
We need to ask better questions instead of trying to get like this Fox News soundbite.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if you listened to the answers to that question, but I didn't re-listen to all of them. So, but at the time when I was listening to them, I felt like ultimately that each of us, it was a bit of a spectrum, but it wasn't polar opposites. It was, there's a place for SROs, and because mine was to the I suppose let's call it the left, right? Because that's what it is, to the left of that spectrum of the six of us, that then I became the binary defund the police, right? No SROs, when in fact that wasn't what I said. So it's, so it's like
you didn't say we need more counseling. You didn't actually say that we should defund all of the police and military in the United States.
No. And so, but that's what, that because let's face it, it's local politics, but it's, politics in this day and age is extremely divisive and extremely polarizing. And I'm surprised, this is part of that kind of knock the wind out of me kind of stuff. I'm surprised that it is, that idea is so entrenched in local politics for a school board, where we all, like to your point, and I completely agree, we all have the best intentions. We all want what's best for the students. We all want to make the school district great. We all want to create an educational environment that's truly supportive. I think we could take each of our little, taglines or whatever, and it would resonate with each of us.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I don't think, and so there isn't that, you're either with us or you're not, or it's you against me. We're all in this together. I hate saying that because that's overused.
No, I appreciate where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I actually did one of my shorter podcasts yesterday on the nature of victory in the end, a lot of times looking like defeat. And there's overwhelmingly this issue that when people do whatever they have to do to win, scratching and clawing, and I haven't had a lot of success in life or things that I would consider massive victories, but I have had a couple. And when you finally get to the end, more times than not, when you've done whatever you had to do to get there,
Whatever it takes,
you're kind of looking around and you're like battered and you're bruised and you're just like, what happened? This was not supposed to be what victory looked like. And there used to be a very great sense of, I want to win, but I don't want to win like that, right? There used to be this honorable sense of sportsmanship and good faith and, look, the best idea is going to win the day, instead of, oh, well, you're a Nazi.
Right.
There used to be that genuine sense. And I think what people need to realize, specifically with this local election right now, is that even though it's just small-time local politics, people are starting to attempt to win in ways that they should not be wanting to win. They're attempting to win in ways that vilify individuals in the community that have the best intentions. They're attempting to win in ways that divide us after the election. They're attempting to win in ways that do not progress the wonderful community that we live in. Because what good is it going to do to convince everyone in the community that Laura Bratt wants to defund the police? How is that winning in a right way? How is that taking Laura's ideas and saying, you know what, I think I can beat this idea with a better idea? They're not doing that. And I think people need to take a step back and say, look, even if I can win, do I want to win like this? Is this going to help everyone? Because I might be the victor, but are you going to want to be victorious and have the rest of the world look like hell all around you? That's not a very good victory. That victory would look very distinctly like defeat in my mind.
Yeah. And I mean, I can tell you that as I'm listening to you, that I am going to acknowledge that I have felt like, and he's not a direct opponent of mine, but I don't have great thoughts around Greg Marvel, but I need to acknowledge that and know that he also is in this for the right reasons and that he's doing the best that he can. From my perspective, I feel like we need people on the board that I think that sometimes he has blinders on, and I would like to see someone on the board that, like me, so you got it.
Yeah, but you're wearing glasses.
I know, but that looks at the broad view instead of the narrow view. That's my perspective,
yes.
Right? But in saying that, I also need to remind myself that doesn't mean that I can put words into his mouth, like what I did at the beginning when I said that he said that I wanted to, and I didn't re-listen to that, so that was in my head, not out of his mouth, right? And acknowledge that and be aware of that, and pull myself back from those biases, because that's what it is, right? It's the bias and the fight that you grab onto and you use and you wield, to win.
And you see this little, everybody sees, I think we are all much more geared towards seeing little sound bites or little sentences like, oh, dropped a dagger. I'm going to pick up that dagger and I'm going to shank him. I'm going to get him. And that's like, Greg is great. You're great. Kumar's great. They're all, I spoke to Scott Roberts today. He's great. I have spoken in length to all 6 of you.
Yeah.
You're all great. I wish all of you could be on the board. I truly do, because you all have wonderful, unique perspectives and a variety of life experiences. And we need to harness that. And if we get to the end of this election and the 2 that do win are hated by the vast majority of the community, and the 4 that don't win are hated by a portion and then pissed off and lead these charges to, it's like nobody wins at the end of that. If we get to the end of this and everybody says, hey, like I told you, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It would be great to have you back on to hear what your perspective is as time goes on, because you have a valuable perspective and you are clearly giving to the community and trying to do this and trying to get your ideas to win the day and come up with the best ideas. We need to come together as a community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we don't, we're going to get Fox News, debates all over. Not Fox News, but the presidential debates on whatever news station they were on.
Right.
But the point
they
is,
were on all of them. Yeah.
They're ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's not any kind of dialogue.
Right.
That's not any kind of conversation. You didn't learn anything great. You didn't have better ideas winning the day. You didn't have people fighting for intellectual superiority. You had people just fighting. And that's what we do here now on Facebook and Nextdoor.
There's no discourse. I mean, I growing up, there was always political conversation around the table, and it wasn't. I mean, yes, it was skewed through a certain lens because of the parents that I had and the environment that I was in, but it was conversation. It wasn't just this, it was about changing each other's minds. It was about talking through things and ideas and having the conversations that are hard, but that can be really fun, and I can tell you that,
the only thing fun about the debate last night was the fly on his head.
Yes.
That was the only fun thing.
I thought
the
sure
memes that came around with the fly on the head, I was like, that is fantastic.
I thought it got stuck in his hairspray or something, and then I noticed it flew away.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's like that's like the world gives us like, here's a win, everybody. Just a little something to chuckle about.
Right.
Because the number of people that were swayed one way or another by that debate, exactly 0.
Yeah.
So at least we could see a fly on some dude's white hair.
Right. The fact that his hair was so white and and then the HD of it all.
Are you being an ageist, calling his hair white? How dare you?
He's probably younger than me.
He's stressed. He's stressed out. He's got a hard job. Listen,
yeah.
Laura, I don't want to take any more of your time. I so appreciate you reaching out to me and being willing to have this conversation. I think it's abundantly clear that you want safe schools and you want to represent all voices, and I think that's wonderful. And all voices deserve to be represented. And solutions found, public education serves all.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate this tons. And I just want to say that it's opportunities like this, which is why I'm running, to be able to have these conversations and talk to people and about things. It's win or lose, this is the best part of the game for me. So thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.